After this presentation, please visit our YouTube channel. Hit subscribe while you're there. That really helps us out. That's where we archive all of our new content. So go there, watch our old content, go there after today and check out our new content every day. So stay until the end as well to find out more information on donating to AAM. So welcome to another educational and inspiring AAM workshop. This entitled Managing Grief, Tools for Activists. Alaina and I are going to talk about the nature of grief as it pertains to doing activism and all that we encounter as activists and ways to cope and more. We sort of revised this workshop that started a little bit more on communication skills, and now we're going to go deeply into coping with grief because it's so important, we find. So my name is Michelle Granberg. I'm your moderator. I'm a mentor and team member with Animal Activism Mentorship. I'm located in New Jersey, and I've been a vegan and activist for over 6 years. Our mission at AAM is to empower activists to boldly act and equip them with what they need to fight for animal liberation. AAM is a free multinational program supporting new and fledgling animal rights activists to reach their full potential. Founded in 2020, AAM offers a free 3-month mentorship program which pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. Through one-on-one mentoring, we generate an increased number of effective activists worldwide because we know this movement needs more activists. Additionally, we offer free workshops like this that train and educate our mentors, mentees, and the public on various aspects of animal rights activism. We have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour, and we host large-scale in-person activism events around the country. Again, stay tuned for those announcements at the end. And if you're interested in applying to become a mentor or mentee or want to get involved or to donate, please visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com. Okay. So that being said, I don't know, I feel like I need to give just a little trigger warning because we're going to be talking about grief and some sensitive areas and the emotions that we encounter that can be painful. We're going to talk about how to cope with those emotions, but at the same time, it might bring some stuff up for you. So we're inviting you to be aware of that and manage that, and certainly something we can share as well. So I'm going to start, and then Alaina is going to come in after me. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm starting us out with just some general thoughts on grief. I mean, it's a big topic. There's so much we can say about it. You can, in this workshop, have your own individual experience of, everybody can relate to grief. Everybody's lost someone, whether animal or person. So, hopefully this will be a time that you can find some insight and some healing. So grief is the natural and holistic response to death or any major loss. So grief is even, we can grieve when we get a divorce. When our marriage is over, we grieve. So any major loss, whatever we consider to be that. Grief is can be a strong and overwhelming emotion. Grief is a direct experience, a direct personal experience, as well as existential and spiritual. Grief can cause us to question the meaning of life and existence, those bigger questions, because there's so much mystery. Death is mysterious in so many ways, although we may all have our beliefs. We don't know for certain, but grief can cause us to ask what happens when we die, and is there life after death, or when we, for us and for our loved ones, animal and human loved ones. Grief kicks us out of our ordinary day-to-day robotic functioning. Grief can be a catalyst for self-improvement and decision-making. It might force us to reorganize our priorities and put things into perspective. How we sort of say, under the umbrella of death, it sort of makes a lot of things seem minor, the small stuff. Not that we're minimizing anything at all here, but. So I put this slide together just to, let you check in with emotionally. And it's so important to be aware of our emotions And, that's really a self-mastery. If we want to master ourselves, if we want to be able to regulate our emotions, which we do need to be able to do, we have to be aware of them. We have to some degree, be able to identify them and name them and claim them. So it's normal. We're saying it's all normal. It's all within the scope of normal. What these emotions, when we're grieving, tend to break down to sadness, of course, and sometimes anger and anxiety and depression and disbelief or shock, denial, right? Denial is not really an emotion as much as it is sort of a mental state, a mental habit, numbness, loneliness, overwhelm, guilt, and fear. So just reflecting for yourself where you tend to land when you're grieving. Where do you land? Where do you stay? Where do you get stuck? What do you move through quickly in terms of your emotions? There's no right or wrong in any of this. There's no timeline or pacing or judgment around any of this. This is all just sort of the general experience that we all share. So activists, thinking about your activism and all that you encounter directly and indirectly, we are thinking about animals every day. We're fighting for them every day. We're seeing photos of them every day. If we're fortunate, we're nose to nose with the ones that are happy, and sometimes we're nose to nose with the ones that are stuck in friggin' cages or behind bars or inside trucks. And so all of this creates chaos in our emotions very often, and a lot. It brings up a whole lot. So as we start to think of the specific examples and things that activists do that can trigger anticipatory grief and grief, right? Pre-grief, anticipatory grief, and then when there's a direct loss. So I'm sure you can think of more than these, but anticipatory grief, to define it, is when grieving starts before death in anticipation of imminent death or loss. Alaina is going to talk even more about this as well. It can be caused when activists encounter, when we're bearing witness to animals on their way to slaughter during a vigil or live market, right? And we cannot save them. They are going to die. They're going to be killed soon or at some point very soon. So it's such a unique position to be in and a heart-rendering position to be in. So it's something to be really tender and aware of in ourselves. So I will say, interesting timing that I did go to a vigil just this morning. So I definitely experienced this, and I let myself feel it as it arrived. So I cried a good cry at least 3 or 4 times while I was there, but definitely initially when I first arrived. Does everybody have similar experiences, like when you first see, or is it more after you've left that it hits you? When do you allow it to hit you, or don't you? Or when does it tend to organically, spontaneously hit you, the grief, the tears, the sadness, the height of the emotion? Often I'll let myself feel it when I'm alone in the car. That's when I'm finally like by myself. That's often when things hit me. It's all normal. It's all fine. Also anticipatory grief when we see animals on a farm or any type of breeding facility, right? You see them with the tags in their ears. We know that they have an execution date on their head. And if we really connect with that, you may start to grieve. When we see animals who aren't able to be saved, when we're rescuing animals, those of us who do some rescue work, deliberately or spontaneously, wherever we go, I think that the energy of activists tends to draw animals in need. Do you not find that? You can share in the chat whatever this might be bringing up. Don't you find that they find us? Those who want to be saved, that's that weird phenomenon. I'm telling you, something there. And rescuing animals who are fatally injured, yet they're still alive. And maybe we are able to get them, rush them somewhere where they can be saved, or maybe they die in our arms, or maybe they die on the table, at the rehabbers or at the vet or wherever you may go. So what's that like? You can share in the chat if you'd like to do that, or what has really hit you the most, what you've seen and felt and experienced as an activist loving animals and losing animals. Seeing dogs and cats in high kill shelters, situations like that, or in hoarding situations, knowing that most of them, if they've been hoarded, they are probably too sick and they will probably need to be euthanized, all kinds of situations. So grief can be triggered by seeing them in person or online, right? That secondary trauma. This is secondary trauma, secondary grief in the sense, the way it hits us from witnessing them, but even hearing about it secondhand or third hand. So you can share in the chat. I can't see the chat right now, but certainly free to share in the chat other examples where you began to grieve, even in the presence of a living animal, or how it hit you afterwards. So, did I skip? Okay. So familiarizing you with some of the typical, and everybody's different, but kind of common physical and behavioral symptoms of grief, so that there's always an aftermath to seeing what we see, and we carry it for different lengths of time, a couple of hours, or maybe we carry it for 24 hours, or I know I'm still carrying it right now. I can still see their faces and I feel it like a knot in my stomach, knowing their fate, and that but we gave them some comfort. So belly aches and headaches, anybody get those? Changes in sleeping, eating routine, exhaustion, fatigue, low energy, crying, sobbing, weeping, sometimes nonstop. So you have to gauge yourself if you need some extra support from your support system, or from professionals, or from other mentors or activists. Overreactions to daily demands, difficulty communicating, difficulty in relationships and socializing, isolating, right? So this is sort of the spectrum, right? The continuum on which our grief can often fall, and the inability to focus or concentrate. This is normal, but it's not as healthy if this continues and you can't get dressed in the morning or take a shower, or you're not functioning. So you're welcome to share in the chat what you notice about this and where you fall and yourself. Okay, so we're going to take a little step forward from grief to talk about coping with grief, managing grief as a normal part of life, and a normal part of what we do as animal advocates. We need to have an arsenal, some tools. We need to develop mindset strategies and ways of being in the world that allow us to manage, so we can continue, so we can still thrive and have moments of joy in our lives and keep helping the animals. So mindfulness, if you have a definition of mindfulness, put it in the chat, how you describe it. But I will say my thoughts are that mindfulness as a way of being in the world. It's not just meditation or just breathing, or it's not just about mindful walking. Those are practices, mindful practices, but mindfulness is a state, right? It's a way of being in the world that is about bringing non-judgmental, compassionate awareness to the present moment as it unfolds. So it is about shifting awareness. When you become mindful, in that moment when you become mindful, you've shifted your awareness. Mindfulness is paying attention on purpose in the present moment with detached compassion. Another way of describing it, mindfulness meditation, when we bring mindfulness and meditation together, they marry perfectly. It's bringing that heightened state, that detached, compassionate state of awareness, to a neutral focal point, like the breath, the body, movements, surroundings, sounds, sensations, or to quiet, even to quiet and silence. You can be mindful of quiet. You can be with the quiet, with the silence, or to everything or nothing, right? So it feels like that's advanced mindfulness. No. Mindfulness 201, to be mindful of everything and nothing at once. So mindfulness as it applies to grief, and then we're going to do a little brief mindfulness breathing, how it can help, in theory at least, with our anticipatory grief, with our grief with animals, It can help us face life and embrace what we are experiencing without avoiding or stopping the natural process. So it is that delicate balance mindfulness helps us with, of being with our emotions and not suppressing them, because then they're going to eat us away from the inside. Our emotions, they're going to find their way to our awareness. So it's that balance of being aware of our emotions, not completely identifying with them, but at the same time, managing and letting them arise. Mindfulness helps us live in the present moment where our grief resides, making us more keenly aware of sadness and pain so we can begin to heal it, right? If awareness is key to everything, as you are aware, then you're in the position of power. If you make yourself aware, you're in a power seat, a seat of change, a seat where you can transform something. Mindfulness may involve loving kindness. Loving kindness is a core practice of mindfulness, stems from the Buddhist traditions, Buddhist path. It's a way of talking to ourselves with kindness, applying the unconditional kindness and radical forgiveness, radical self-compassion to everything as best we can, especially when we need to navigate grief and that pain. Don't kick yourself when you're feeling that pain. Don't berate yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Apply loving kindness and self-compassion. Mindfulness helps us accept our feelings with self-compassion. Mindfulness is a form of self-care. It's the gift of giving patience, time, and nurturance to ourselves. So, oops, nope. All right, we're going to do a little mindfulness now. This is nothing fancy. This is just sitting and breathing. And I'm going to sort of frame the sitting and breathing in a mindfulness context so that you get it, you feel it, you get the felt sense of being mindful through breath awareness. And so what I'm recommending certainly is to do this before you go to see the animals, during, after, and when you're feeling whatever you're feeling. Okay. So you may close your eyes for just a moment. We won't do this for very long, but you're welcome to close your eyes or just look downward and just sit up and just relax your body, let your shoulders drop and just be in your seat. Now this is what we do with mindfulness, bring a heightened, non-judgmental awareness to your breath, right? Good. See, you just become aware of your breath. You weren't aware a moment ago and now you are. And as your mind wanders, no matter what your mind says, steer back to the breath. And release the dialogue of right, wrong, expectation, attachment. Release that dialogue and return to the breath. And do your best to stay in the present moment. Now, breathe a little slower. Slow down your breathing. Deepen your breath. Take full breaths, complete breaths, filling your lungs completely until there's no more room for air. And then exhale, right? Don't gyp yourself. Don't take half a breath. Take a whole breath. Long breaths. Sorry, that's my dog at the door. Then notice any bodily sensations, right? The mechanics of breath is the lungs are filling. You can feel that, the lungs filling. Your belly rising. The warmth of the air as it enters your nostrils. Is it cool or is it warm? Usually cool going in, often warm coming out. Notice the rib cage moving, the throat opening. And then notice the effect that is having. And when your mind wanders, return to the breath. And you may wish to place one hand on your belly and the other on your heart or not. But often that helps us center and be more present in our bodies, right? And shift our awareness from our heads, from our pain, for a few moments into our body. Practice patience and stillness now. And so the idea with mindful breathing is to be the detached, neutral, mildly curious observer of your breath. So I'll let you do that, and I'll just shut up for just a moment so you can continue to do that until you find that nice rhythm with it. So when you're ready, you can bring yourself back and just notice currently then the state that you're in. And I hope that you will make the connection between that state and grief and using this as a coping tool. And if anybody wants to share anything, we'll do some more sharing later. If anyone wants to share anything in the chat about that, feel free. And then I'm going to turn it over to Alaina. But wait a minute, Alaina, I have to introduce you. Hold on, Ben. Second. Oh, that's not going to let me. Okay, Alaina Sigler is a certified animal chaplain. She's been supporting efforts for total liberation through grassroots organizing, resident care at farmed animal sanctuaries, permaculture project implementation, vegan food justice efforts, and more for close to a decade. And you can learn more about Alaina's work at thenightskygarden.org. I'll put that in the chat. So she's going to talk about her work as an animal chaplain and coping with grief and how animals grieve, which I'm fascinated by. Go ahead, Alaina, you can.
Hi, thank you so much for that introduction, Michelle. It's wonderful to be here with you all today. I just kind of wanted to start a bit with how I got to this point. And I do have some slideshows I'm going to bring up in a moment. But for me, when, I was young, I guess my journey really started when I was a kid. And I was outside and I was in the dirt and I was there with worms. I was there with free living beings. I was there with the robins who occupied my habitat back in a small suburb just north of Cincinnati, Ohio. I was there with the raccoons and the squirrels. And my time outside, in particular with the worms as a kid, is a moment that I cherish to this day. And so my moments with other beings led me to, I'm sure some of you recognize the name of this organization. I started volunteering at the SPCA Cincinnati when I was in high school. My sister actually inspired me to go spend some time, particularly my time was spent with the dogs at the shelter, time to play and to be there in those moments of joy, but also sorrow with them that I noticed time and time again, as I'm sure some of you have seen in shelter spaces. And so this work was part of my grounding work, my foundational work, I should say, for, how I continued to support other beings. And really what I'm going to be centering in my history is the advocacy that I took part in. And I want to highlight vigils in the Denver area and also up in Greeley here in Colorado that I attended and the impact it had on me as an activist. And so the vigils were a really big turning point in my life because the effects that Michelle was just speaking to started to kind of flood, who I was. And being able to step back took an immense amount of effort. And so my work today, as a result of this journey, has amounted to a few different roles that I play. As a volunteer, as an ongoing advocate, as an ordained interspecies animal chaplain who supports individuals in secular and religious and spiritual contexts, no matter your background, as a writer and a speaker. And so what I want to do at this point is to center ourselves in why we're here. And I want to thank Pro Animal Future for this. And so what I'm going to ask you to do, we'll step into a space together. As I want to invite you to a moment of silence to remember why we're here. And so I invite you to still your body, to find a balanced posture, and to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. This is a moment to remember all the animals who are born into captivity, where they suffered and are killed, to remember how they love and how their families are torn apart, to remember how they resist every day and fight back every day, to remember those who free themselves and those who are freed by others, to remember all those, whether big or small, on the land or in the sea, as well as all those who are invisible to us in our everyday, in our soils and in our homes, and to remember all those whose homes and habitats we invade and destroy, but also to remember all those who live free from human interference and oppression, and the possibility that this offers to all others. And so, as I have ventured into this new role as an animal chaplain, it centers companionship. In its very essence, that is what animal chaplains do. And how do we companion? We can companion those of a variety of species. We companion individuals in grief. We companion those who may be struggling with decisions and end-of-life care. We companion through ceremony, memorials, rituals, and we'll get into a few of those later on. And as I mentioned before, all of these offerings in my chaplaincy work is offered in all different contexts. And this work is really rooted in the idea of Umwelt. And this interesting word, I love saying it, it's just rolls off my tongue. It's the idea that all animals, from the simplest to the most complex, are fitted into their unique worlds with equal completeness. So if you sit with that for a moment and think about what that means, as they are in their worlds, they are complete in their own unique ways. And along with that comes with ways that humans oftentimes intervene to cause suffering. And so what I'll go through now is a series of examples of how grief occurs with other beings. And I'm sure that we have seen footage. I'm sure lots of us have seen footage of mother cows calling for their calves. And so we know that on a daily basis, we silence sentience in innumerable animals in a variety of venues. There's no doubt whatsoever that when it comes to what we can and cannot do to other animals, it is their emotions that should inform our discussions and our actions on their behalf. And I bring it back to the idea of Umwelt. Their emotions are their way of life. And the emotions are the gifts of our ancestors. We have them, and so do other beings. And so as we continue to work through eliminating barriers of human superiority, we can see examples of animal grief popping up in the news. We could also see it in moments where we are in mindfulness in our community, in our outdoor spaces. This was one example. I'm not in the Washington Post. That was highlighted about 5 years ago. And so grief in orcas, elephants, crows, dogs, cats, and I could continue to name many, many other species, manifest in a variety of ways. And if we take that another step and consider their envelop, the individual is also going to have their own very unique experience. Here's another example of, it is called a murder, a group of crows who gathered in community. And it is told that this is an act of mourning. So we see how birds experience emotions that mimic our own. And again, this may not surprise a lot of us as we see it at home, you know, in the family members, such as dogs and cats who we live with. And a beautiful way that their stories are highlighted, and I do recommend this book, is the book How Animals Grieve by Barbara J. King. She says it won't ease our deepest grief to know that animals love and grieve too. But when our mourning becomes a little less raw, or is so far only anticipated, may it bring genuine comfort to know how much we share with other animals. So we can bring it back to those moments of mindfulness. What emotions can we highlight? What emotions may bring us comfort? Because of when we bring our awareness back to ourselves and others, can that ease it up a bit? Can that bring us some comfort and alleviate the moments of grief and however they may manifest? And when it comes to loss and discussions about death, we need to switch over to a bit of planning, thinking about the options before a loss, if able. And that also really depends on a normalization of the topic of death. Normalization enough to get us to a point where we can plan ahead of time. If a family member, for instance, who is a dog, perhaps, who we know may not have much time left with us. And that can look like a variety of options. Maybe that includes hospice care. Maybe that includes considerations for that individual's body and caring for their body in those moments when the loss is with us. And inspiring people to be a part of this decision-making process and truly understanding where they're comfortable and where they're not is very essential. And I would highlight an example of my childhood when oftentimes, and I'm sure there are individuals in this space, we weren't part of the decision-making process. As part of my training program, we created a loss timeline, and we were asked to recall the very first death of an animal that we could remember, up to the most recent, to include the name, when they passed away, and what we were told or perhaps not told. And some really stuck out for me. And I realized there was a lot of moments where I needed to know. I needed to know. And so again, this comes back to the contemplation of death in all the ways and shapes and forms it manifests in our daily life. And we can make efforts to memorialize those who have passed. On the left is an example of an altar that I have set up, and it's ever changing, for a family member named Buddy, who passed away back in 2017. And I have a poem I wrote above her photo. And on the right-hand side is actually an ongoing work that friends and students have put together in collection in memorial, in memory of individuals they knew, perhaps very well, individuals maybe they did not know. And you can see the photo highlighted on the right where it says sorry was actually a student who drew a photo of two cats, and his grief was very profound in that moment when he was engaging in this activity. And so giving children, I will also say, the opportunity to have moments where they can elicit creativity in moments of sorrow or anxiety, or maybe they're uncomfortable because they don't know the story of how someone passed just like I experienced. And to create an album in memory that can be shared in community, in a family, are just a few ideas of ways that we can keep them with us, keep them mindful in our day-to-day lives. One other example is a book of messages. So we can write messages of sorrow, of gratitude, and again, just lots of ways that we can be mindful. And this brings us back to, well, our activism. I mentioned individuals who we may not have known as deeply as those who we share our homes with, or individuals who live freely, but perhaps we see on a day-to-day basis. I have a squirrel who comes and regularly eats out of my compost bin, and we share a moment almost every day together. And when it comes to activism, we can very much have an overwhelming sense of loss and sadness. And I do very much see how that manifests into secondary trauma. I see how that can manifest from taking part in vigils. For me, it also occurs when I walk, in my park adjacent to my home. And I know that they have sprayed pesticides, and I know that they are mowing spaces where beings are living freely. I experience that grief when it has rained and the worms are flooded out of their homes. It occurs in so many different ways. And so as we move forward, we should know that there are explorations in how belief systems have shaped impending loss, including our engagement in social and eco-justice movements. And so one particular study that I found particularly meaningful was called Mourning Nature, the Work of Grief and Radical Environmentalism. And I just want to highlight two pieces here. Grief is a central motivating factor in conversion and commitment activism. It is both an expression of deeply felt kinship bonds with other species and a significant factor in creating those bonds. And this second part, activists' very participation in protest is part of an ongoing process of remembering the dead and disappearing, including those who were intimately known, as well as the more abstract dead of mass extinction and deforestation And so these pieces are likely resonating with a lot of us. If you do resonate with these ideas and you want to mention something in the chat of how it has manifested for you, please do so. And so when it comes to grief and how it transpires in spaces, we know that grief comes up very clearly in vigils. And so this is one I wanted to highlight at a vigil that took place in Denver at Superior Farms. Some of my friends are here in the workshop today, and I know they both have been partaking in vigils in the past. And so I wanted to highlight how our discussion of individual grief and how that can extend outward. And in sheep in particular, that grief can look in a variety of ways. So their anxiety may occur in behaviors such as stomping on the floor, looking out of the windows, perhaps longing for something. We're not exactly sure if that grief is present, but those other emotions that I talked about, the anxiety, perhaps the loneliness, and the very real separation of the lambs from their mothers. That is an ongoing loneliness that they may be experiencing. And the expression of animal emotion doesn't lend itself well to bold generalizations across individuals, any more than the expression of human emotion would, which is why with that photo I just brought up, and I'll bring it up again, I can't really speak to the individual experiences of those who are in the transport truck. Can I observe their behaviors and say, yes, they're experiencing anxiety. Yes, they're experiencing suffering in a variety of capacities. Yes. How that grief is really occurring in a transport truck, I am not too sure. And so to make those generalizations would not be fair in this instance, because we need to be able to contextualize empathy. And that has a variety of pieces that I want to highlight here, including not only, as I mentioned, the individual's feelings, but also their background story. What's been going on? What information have we collected? And how is the support for the individuals transpiring or not, perhaps in this case? If we think of individuals who are brought to a wildlife rehabilitation center, the support may be a variety of pieces. And it is the role of a chaplain to really see how the plan can be supported by those who do know that individual, know species specific information, have had similar instances perhaps in the past that they can utilize to influence their decision-making processes. And I would definitely want to highlight interactions with individuals that are not rooted in anthropomorphism. So not projecting our emotions, not projecting our needs, but again, coming back to presence and really highlighting what is that individual experiencing in this moment. What I'd like to do next, because I know there's anticipatory grief that occurs on a regular basis in activist spaces and in others, is offer a guided visualization. This one uses a practice rooted in distancing imagery And so if you have or have not attended a vigil in the past, I'm sure there are still moments where you can envision a transport truck. And in this one, it will center the holes on the side of the truck. So just be aware of that. So I'm going to go ahead, and if you are comfortable, you can go ahead and get into a comfortable position. You can stop at any time, by the way, and slowly breathe in and out. We're going to start by visualizing a truck with many large holes. And through the holes, you see a lamb. Recognize the emotions and sensations in your body as you visualize the truck. Allow those emotions and sensations if you want. Note what is happening in the present moment, and without judgment, let it be. Now I want you to imagine the truck with a lamb inside as a painting. Notice the colors and shapes of who is in this image. Notice the details up close and what the painting looks like from afar. Again, recognize the emotions and sensations in your body. Allow those emotions and sensations. Now you'll take a camera to take a photo of the painting. As you look at this photo, recognize the emotions and sensations in your body. Allow those emotions and sensations. Take a deep breath with me. And this time we're going to visualize a new setting. It's a place with animals where you feel safe and secure. Imagine this place as a painting. Notice the colors and shapes of who is in the picture. Notice the details up close and what the image looks like from afar. As you look at this photo, recognize your emotions. You can name them out loud or in your mind if you like. And allow those emotions and sensations. So the difference between those two settings might have been pretty different. And so as need be, you can visualize the photo, visualize a safe space as needed. And if need be, in spaces where you are experiencing violence towards animals, bring that painting, bring that photo in distance, but also recognize the emotions that are occurring. This was centered around a practice called RAIN, which was modified by Tara Brock. Some of you may have heard of her work. It's a beautiful practice. I highly recommend checking out her work. And the acronym RAIN is an easy to remember tool for practicing mindfulness and compassion. It's probably similar to other mindfulness techniques that you all have worked with. What we centered in that practice was recognize and allow. Investigate and nurture are also very key, very, very necessary pieces to move into. Because when we go into investigating, we pinpoint those needs that we have. And we nurture ourselves with self-compassion. You can use rain as a standalone meditation or move through the steps whenever challenging feelings arise. Starting with recognizing and allowing. If you're not, if you don't have a history of using a mindfulness practice, might be the best place to start. And then moving into investigating and nurturing. Checking out her website. She has a wonderful collection of meditations. And so, wonderful resource to go back into. And rain can be used in any setting. You can take a moment for rain if you give yourself the space, a minute or two to do so. And so as we are coming to a close here, again and again, we need to ask, what does it mean to bring an abrupt ending to this particular way of life? What does this loss mean inside its specific multi-species communities? How are we called into responsibility here and now? And how will we take that up? So I'm going to offer one last practice. This one, you can respond on paper if you like. With paper and pen, you don't have to. You can simply note out loud or in your mind. But I'm going to ask a series of questions, and this practice is called, is it okay to be okay? So find a comfortable position wherever you may be. Is it okay to be okay? What would it mean if you were okay? Why might you want to remain where you are? And what do you get out of not being okay? What does it do for you? What ways could you have a connection to other beings that does not involve pain? And what is your expectation of yourself as a mourner? How could you move forward adaptively in life and still maintain connections with beings who have passed on, if you so desire? And so as we move forward, I want to highlight a few other bits of what animal chaplains can do. I'm going to stay focused on the right side of the screen because there's a lot of text. In my capacity, I support newly adopted individuals so they can thrive. I encourage strong human-animal bonds with easy activities to do at home. I offer funerals and memorials, including small memorial gardens. Excuse me. I help others get involved in advocacy for the earth and/or animals. I help others process grief after animal loss and advocate for animals in communities where human wants and wildlife needs conflict. I also offer how to develop resiliency by teaching tools to tackle compassion fatigue and empathic distress. One tool that I would love to highlight is called Animal Help Now. Some of you may already have heard of it, but one way that we can directly provide support to free living beings is by using this app. It's also available on all browsers. It's a tool that allows you to pinpoint exactly where you are, the animals, emergency, their species, and it will tell you the closest location to where you can find support for that individual. So in my case, if I find an injured raccoon, it would highlight Greenwood Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, which is just a 40-minute drive from here. And that individual would be able to get direct support. I do recommend calling ahead of time and making sure these places are open if you have somewhere to take them. The app will also tell you what to do and what not to do in that moment, because it might cause further harm. My friend Judy McCoy has said, as we go beyond our own egos and survival instincts and now feel true compassion and connection with others, we begin to understand that we are here to live in such a secure state of inner peace and joy, that we are well equipped to help bring about a world of peace and joy for all others. So I want to thank you all for being here with me in this space today and joining me in these practices. I invite you to reach out to me, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. I do offer complimentary supports up to 30 minutes free of charge. If you are willing to have supports in one of those fashions, please reach out, and I'm happy to meet with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Alaina. That was wonderful. So we are going to open it up now to you here with us. We've put a lot of information here, lots to think about. So how is it landing? How is it striking you? What's it bringing up? Anything you want to share? I just, encourage you to just stay on topic because it's easy to go off on a lot of different tangents with this, but we'll do our best to keep coming back to, for you, your experiences with grief, how you cope, if you learned something today about some things you may try or think of differently. If you want to share anything Alaina offered, reflecting on your first loss of your first animal you've lost and recent ones. What was that like? What was the difference between those times? Do you have ways of using ritual or memorializing? It could be companion animals, but it can also be animals in sanctuaries and wherever you encounter them. So a hand up. So Jyoti, you can unmute and ask your question.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Michelle and Alaina. Great session. My question is for both of you, since you have excellent presentations, both of you. My strategy for animal activism is obviously to like as many animal cruelty posts and then share them. But at the same time, I'm also painfully aware that A, I'm exposing myself to secondary trauma, and B, I'm exposing my milieu to secondary trauma. But I'm sort of feel compelled to do that. It's just, just watching food porn, so to speak, is not cutting it for me, and I know it's not creating animal liberation per se. So what's the healthy balance? How am I sort of like dooming myself into this grief because I am aware of all the trauma, and B, I'm exposing myself, and C, I'm propagating that grief. So am I in a vicious circle? Well, how do I break out from it, and how is effective animal liberation going to be achieved?
That's really, I mean, just the fact that you notice the subtlety of that, and you are self-aware, and that's really the first suggestion, is to be self-aware, and only you best in terms of when it is too much for you and when you need to back off and when you're getting burnt out, and giving yourself permission to do that. Certainly. And then all the tools we mentioned here, mainly having self-compassion, is very important. Alaina, you want to add anything?
Oh, I think you touched on it beautifully, Michelle. I think when we have that awareness of when it's too much, maybe that's when our boundary comes up. And I appreciate you for bringing up all those pieces, because I know so many who have been in that same vicious circle, as you have said, including myself. It is incredibly common. You're not the only one. And so what I want to highlight is that, you know, when we do have those feelings of being overwhelmed, or the anxiety that pops up from seeing those images or videos or whatever they may be of such violence, maybe that's our moment when we take a step back and ground ourselves, because there is very important work to do. But just like Michelle said, and I want to bring up again, you know, we can root ourselves in that self-awareness and move forward with the practices that are best for us, that are compassionate. Because this work, as it needs to continue, it's challenging to do without coming back to the mind, the body. If we have a spiritual practice, coming back to our spiritual selves, you know, whatever our beliefs may be, coming back to our home. So
Great. I hope that's helpful. And I mean, you mentioned balance. I mean, that balance is sort of fluid day by day. You know, our pivot point in feeling balanced is all over the map very often on a day-to-day basis. Overall, in general, I'll say we want to try to build resilience across the board as a strength, as a muscle that we build. It can only help us as activists so we can continue doing what we're doing. And yet part of resilience is knowing when, you know, when we need to take a break, you know, as well, and then continue to build that ability to bounce back. But again, just without judgment. All of this is without judgment. That's the last thing we need to do, is judge ourselves. So thank you for that. Anybody else have a comment or a share or a feedback kind of thing, or a question or an answer or a resource? Russ, is it Russ? You have your hand up. You can unmute, ask. No? Oh, or do you want to ask? Can't hear anything. Is it me? Can anybody else hear? No? Okay. Yeah, you can, yeah, Russ, you can put your comment in the chat. Great. Sorry for the sound glitch.
Can I say something?
Who's that, Jackie?
Can you hear me? Yeah, sorry, it's Jackie. Yeah, I
Yeah.
just wanted to say I really appreciated the distancing visualization. I haven't actually been to a vigil yet because I feel like I'm just going to sob the whole time. So I'm going to practice that and then have that in my toolkit when I go. So thank you.
Thank you, Jackie, for sharing that. I remember how I felt before I went to my first vigil. And actually what I did was reach out to my mentor. I really honestly did. I was a mentee at the time before I went to my first. Not that I'm like deliberately promoting AAM, but it is good. But I think it brings up, we need to mention, having a support circle is like this is super important. It's like crucial. A support system of similarly minded, similar action oriented folks, activists, vegans, compassionate folks that you can lean on and talk to and be honest with them. So thank you, Jackie. So did Russ put his question in the chat, you guys? If so, can someone find it, read it if it's there? Or I'll come back to that. Okay, but Kayla, you have your hands up. Kayla, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So I appreciate Alaina for all the work that you do. I think it's just incredibly important because, like, as animal activists, we have to like be mindful of what we're doing and how we're impacting animals, and we just go through that every single day. I think a lot of us pretty much wake up and pretty much eat, drink, and sleep pretty much animal activism and try and make a better world. And so I'm trying to process all of the emotions that we have to go through each and every day, the ups and downs. I think that this webinar is incredibly insightful and helpful. Thank you.
100%. Okay, so Erin, who's sound and work stage, I just wanted to say that I think it's so common for activists to burn out because we want to do everything possible and feel guilty if we don't. We have a great local group of activists here in Austin. That's wonderful to hear, Erin. That is so important. We can just sort of be there for one another. When someone needs it a little bit more, we can join. And when we need a little bit more, we can ask for that help. But I'm glad you brought up the G word, guilt, because that is absolutely a common experience and probably the biggest block or the biggest, pain point for us as activists is that guilt. And what can we say about guilt? Because guilt is a natural thing, and it comes from that sense of frustration and helplessness and hopelessness and wanting to blame somebody so we can stop the thing from happening and taking on too much ourselves. So, guilt is normal, natural, but it can be toxic and unhealthy for us if not processed and released after some quality and quantity of time. So same thing applies with guilt, is self-compassion, detachment, zooming out, stepping back, observing, getting a more detached point of view, maybe writing down why you feel guilty, what exact thoughts you're having that are negative and repetitive that are triggering that guilt, and maybe a forgiveness meditation, or a compassion meditation, loving kindness meditation. I wish we could do all of those here. Alaina, do you have anything to add about guilt there, or?
Just to say, I've been there time and time and time again. It is so common. Kayla, I wanted to say hi, by the way. Yeah, I lived and breathed guilt, needing to keep going. I thought I was the Energizer Bunny back in the day, and it took burning out to really come back to myself and have that self-empathy that I really, really was longing for, but I wasn't aware of. And so recognizing feelings of guilt, and for me, oftentimes they were associated with anxiety and being overwhelmed. Now when I have those sensations, I can bring myself into the present moment and I can nurture myself and identify my need. And I can tell myself I've been here before. It's not doing anything to help me. I can take a few deep breaths, move on with my day. And sometimes it takes a bit more contemplation. Sometimes I can't sit with it in that moment, be present, calm myself and ground myself and move on. Sometimes it takes a bit more work. And this is ongoing practices that I gift myself on a regular basis. Time for contemplation through meditation. And very, very often noticing when I am present throughout the day is very helpful, especially in moments when I think and it pops up, I'm not doing enough. Wait a second, I totally am. But back in the day, maybe some of the boundaries for the things that weren't sitting right with me were needed. And now that's an awareness that I have. What is working well for me and in community with others, who are those mentors, that support system like Michelle mentioned, that I can go back to. And those are folks who understand me. Being understood is just so, so critical.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, thank you.
It's so sacred to be on the receiving end or the giving end of just validating somebody's feelings. That just in that just 10-second genuine validating someone's feelings, it's such a relief to be understood, for us to be seen and felt and heard, it's just really powerful. And I wanted to add too, because I do pet loss bereavement work. I'm a pet loss bereavement specialist, and guilt is absolutely just universal. It's almost like a pet parent I can't think of one time even when there's not some amount of guilt. And it's because of the level of investment and commitment we make to our companion animals in the first place, and how innocent they are, and how we make a lifelong vow to be their steward and to take care of them. And then at the end, we can't, they do not live forever, and there comes that point. And so counseling people through that, when you have to have a pet euthanized, or a pet is sick, a companion animal is sick. And I'll remind people that growth is like an outgrowth of love. It's sort of the flip side. We feel guilt because we feel such deep love. So I see Jackie has her hand up. Let me just read real quick Leif's comment in the chat, and then Jackie will have your sharing as well. So Leif, I like this comment. Burnout is real, not just in animal activism. What can we do to be long-term activists? Communities are critical. And also doing team building. We don't have to always be trying to save animals or going to vigils. Yeah. The team approach, a tag team approach, right? Any tips on that, Alaina, for you resilience, building resilience, to be in this for the marathon? It's not a sprint, knowing that this movement is going to outlive us. It really is. This movement's going to continue when you and I are no longer here, and just sort of accepting that, maybe applying some acceptance to that.
Yes, and I'd like to come back to, I think I found Russ's question from before.
Aaron. Russ is her husband.
Oh, Aaron. Yes. For me, my resilience comes back to my awareness, in presence, and having boundaries. Something comes up that's kind of feeling prickly, and I really sit and determine, is this something I can take on? Is this something I could do later? Or is this something I need to just not put on my plate ever? And sometimes sometimes it's tough. And other times it's like, yeah, that's not for me. For me, it stems down to, what are my passions? What do I find joy in doing? That really is the foundation of the work that I'm doing today. Where do I find joy and ongoing gratitude with the individuals who I spend my time with? To me, that's very, very important. And so just having a foundation in joy and gratitude, and coming back to, moments where I experience those, I think is how I've built up resiliency over time, and not trying to do, anything and everything that comes my way, and I did all sorts of stuff back in the day. Oh gosh, my weekends would be packed, and then my weekdays would be packed, and I was teaching full time, and it didn't work. So
That's so important. Take our advice, having done this for a while. Sustainability in the long term, you have to have joy. You can have joy and hold the space for the suffering of the animals. They don't have to cancel each other out. There's a way to hold space for both, and we still have to have joy in our lives. That's the fuel that keeps us getting out of bed in the morning. So Jackie, you have your hand up. You can unmute and ask your question.
Yes. Well, first, can I say, if we get a chance, can we talk more about holding joy and grief at the same time? Because I have no idea how I would do that. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you're probably going to say breathe and meditate. I'm already giving the answer, but it doesn't seem to work. So, and maybe it will just take practice. So I was just going to ask, in the middle of the night, unfortunately, if I wake up and I start thinking about the animals, I just get into a loop, and I know it's obsessive and I can't stop, and I lose a lot of sleep, but it's happening a lot. It's not good for my daily life, let me tell you. So any thoughts about that would be really welcome.
Alaina, do you want to go there? And then I can answer.
Well, I wanted to say, I'm sorry that's happening to you. And I know how troubling that can be, and how challenging it can be to move in our day-to-day lives without enough sleep. And it's so common, it's so common as activists to have those moments where, we're kind of flooded with the violence. We're flooded with what we are supposed to be doing, whatever it may be. And so I guess I want to ask, is there anything that you have found to help yourself when you're not trying to sleep?
Yeah, there's a meditation offered at the back of the Vistopia book. And then actually Michelle, one of her workshops, there's a meditation there as well. That's really the only thing, like during the day, you know, if I can, well, not if, I've been really making an effort to do them almost every day. Gives me relief.
Yeah.
Do you try that meditation? Have you tried that meditation before you get ready for bed?
Oh, why didn't I think of that? Yeah, I should probably, rather than doing it like 8 hours before bedtime, maybe do it closer to bedtime. That's a good idea.
I hope that works for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely, you know, ways to not tame the mind. I don't want of us to ever think of our thoughts and our mind as the enemy, or use these words like I'm battling with my thoughts. And it's not that, but there is a certain amount of making peace with your own mind and maybe redirecting. And that's what meditation often helps us do, redirect our attention to something more pleasant, something more productive at the very least, and often something relaxing that guides us into that relaxation mode.
Yeah, one thing that was new to me that I read somewhere that I was saying to myself last night, this helps nothing. This helps no animal, doesn't help me. It helps nothing. But
I hope that works. Sometimes applying a little logic, a little rationale often can be the thing to sort of refute your own mind in that way. But just a heads up, if folks are really experiencing like big time flashbacks, and that could be something, in your case, Jackie, I don't think that's the case, but just make sure if you really are having invasive thoughts that you can't stop, then reach out to someone who can, maybe a more professional in that regard. So, but thank you for sharing that. Kayla, do you want to unmute, and then I'll go to the couple of stuffs in the chat.
Okay. Yeah. I guess doing animal activism for a little bit, I've come to regard some of the leaders that kind of like see everyone come in and come out, burn out and come in. And one of the best tools that some of the organizers do is like they check in with people that they see consistently over and over and over. And they say, hey, are you doing okay? Do you need a break? You know, you don't have to come this time around. If you need, you know, a break to kind of like center yourself and, you know, get focus on yourself and your life real quick. I think that's helped a lot of people, especially those that go like hard, like all day sometimes. And yeah, and for me also, to answer the other person, what's helped me is that I know that everything that I do is like a ripple, to use an allegory, in like a placid lake or something. Everything I do is a ripple, and each of those ripples reach someone else, and eventually you start to see qualitative changes in the world as the movement grows and grows more. And I think that's helpful.
That was a great statement. You could be running this with us. That was great. It's so important, and identifying that's what makes a good leader and a good organizer. Someone who checks in with us, someone who's aware of how everybody's feeling, taking the temperature of the activists, and maybe going over to someone who, you know, during a vigil who needs that extra support. You know, let's all cultivate that in ourselves, because we can't necessarily rely on others for that, but we can try certainly to cultivate that for ourselves. So Trey put a question in the chat. Do you ever grieve? You hear my animals, or maybe not. You ever grieve animals that are perfectly healthy because you know you will likely outlive them? How do we stay in the moment? Does anybody relate to that? Grieving animals are young and healthy, and they're going to be around for a long time, but you have those moments where you think about the thing you try not to think about. Probably all of us, like, we don't want to think about that we are gonna, their lifespan is inevitably, for the most part, you know, shorter than theirs. And I would say some tools for that might be well, a gratitude list. When you get into that space, maybe just say 10 things you're grateful for about your beloved companion. And how do you stay in the moment? Have the intention to be present, cultivate presence, cultivate being in the present moment, and also carve out time, quality time with your beloved companion, because we get really busy and we think we're hanging out with them, but we're all over. We're walking back and forth. We're not really, we think we might give them a little pet, take a moment and feed them. But like, there's another level of that. And I try to do that with each of my dogs every single day, like really connect, like really be so totally present and eye contact and just be immersed in their aura. And I know I'm there because I feel this warmth and this, like, I smile. And so there's another level of, it's like meditating with your dog, like sit and be present, block out the world. And that's what's going to help you when eventually their absence, the void, there's going to be a void that they once occupied, for sure. But then you can go back to those memories and you can feel that you soaked in as much of each other as you possibly could while they were alive, right? That live while as if tomorrow's your last day kind of energy. Alaina, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, just to continue with what you were sharing, when those losses occur, there are ways to create, we call them habituals, so that these rituals, routines that we experience on a day-to-day basis with those we have grown to know can continue, but there's a little creative twist to it. Those rituals continue, but then when the emotions come up and we are all of a sudden flooded with sadness, maybe there's something we can do in its place. Because sometimes, those memories of, okay, now's the time in the morning where I need to go walk with Buddy. And how does that transpire when that walk with that individual will not occur? And so that's one of the things that I work out with folks is finding where their needs are and finding creative opportunities for those rituals to continue, but in a little bit of a different way, so that they can have that moment of presence. Because that's what it all ultimately is about. It's the memories of that individual, and how can we continue those memories in a bit of a different way to allow those situations to not be as overwhelming over time, and to transform that grief.
It all takes a lot of practice in a good way, but it's the best kind of practice, improving ourselves, helping ourselves, being our own best friend. I'm going to read we're going to have to wrap up in a little bit, but I'm going to read Victoria's question and comment here for us. Speak a little bit about disenfranchised grief. Example, grief that society doesn't condone because it's so uncomfortable, such as non-vegans wanting vegans to stay quiet and not bring their grief to the table, so to speak, because of the guilt and shame it might produce in the non-vegans. The disenfranchised grief of vegans, animal activists, is hard, if not impossible, to process when it seems like we have to hide it in the pro-animal exploitation, pro-animal cruelty world we live in. Yeah, so I get that. It rattles people and it makes other people uncomfortable. Everything we do, pretty much as activists and vegans, pushes buttons and makes people uncomfortable because of the cognitive dissonance, because we're showing them places where they're out of alignment, and that's not our end goal. Our end goal is animal liberation, but on the way there, we are bringing things up for people. And so, yeah, disenfranchised grief is grief. The opposite of disenfranchised grief would be when you and I lose our grandmother or our grandfather. It is well accepted and supported, and you'll get so much support from people out of the woodwork wonderfully. When your grandmother dies, you'll get the phone calls. But when we lose, sometimes even we lose a companion animal, and when you and I are grieving the loss of an animal at a sanctuary, or the collective loss of, that we shoulder of all the animals we know are dying daily, And we can't just speak about it at the table and just normally and just anywhere. That's that disenfranchised. And what it does is it just puts another layer of difficulty very often on top of what's already difficult in terms of us, our grieving, and knowing grieving is normal. Now it's like others are shutting us down because it makes them uncomfortable. And there's no easy fix for that. I think talking about it just like this, just becoming aware of it, that there is such a thing as disenfranchised grief, and you feel it and you experience it. And so maybe you can't necessarily talk about it anywhere and everywhere, but you need to have an outlet for it. You need to be able to talk about it, and don't take on their shame, their guilt that they may be feeling, and the shame they may project towards you. Alaina, what do you think? Yeah.
I think you brought up a lot of wonderful points. You know, another level of awareness is not taking on another's emotion that we don't necessarily need to take on. You know, we have a lot that we might be dealing with on our own. And yeah, it is very important to normalize and validate grief and other emotions as they come. And so there are spaces to do that, as Michelle mentioned, with AAM, with a mentor. If you are involved in activism and you have a community of folks that you can go to, and you know that some will hear and understand you, that's just beautiful. That is so wonderful. And so there's so many spaces where we can find belonging that we ultimately very much long for. Because when these moments come up, sometimes coming back to ourselves may be just that much more challenging. And in the end, in community is where we ultimately end up finding ourselves, in however that comes up. So when we find those spaces, it's a beautiful thing. And
Hold on to those spaces when you find them, or they find you. Like this, gravitate. They'll find you, you find them, gravitate to your tribe in that way. Don't isolate and only be with your tribe, of course, but you know, we validate right now each other's disenfranchised grief. And in this space, it's not disenfranchised. It's real. It's real. And I say this with not in a judgmental way, but the rest of the world is kind of crazy because they don't feel, they feel apathy instead of empathy. Not that, not judging that, but it's just, that's so remembering that and putting it in perspective. It is an insane, a crazy situation that we're in the first place. So I think, can that wrap it up? Did I hopefully hit all the questions? There's a lot of great comments in the chat, so you guys can read those, but I think we'll start to wrap up. Thank you all very much. Alaina, any final words? I'm going to wrap up with some of our usual announcements. It's a veggie wrap. Thank you, Jyoti. Yes, it's a veggie wrap up. Any final words though, Alaina?
Nothing else at this time. I'm going to include my website in the chat. Please feel free to reach out as you wish. And I look forward to seeing some of you who are local, and those who are not, may we cross paths at some point. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. So I hope this has been helpful. I want to announce our next workshop. Thursday, July 20th, we have The Turning Point in the Animal Freedom Movement with Robert Grillo, one of our activists and founder of the Slaughter Free Network. So I hope you'll join us for that, and more workshops to be announced. And again, please check out our previous workshops on our YouTube channel and subscribe. I'd also like to announce our 2023 live events. The Portland, Oregon Convergence is August 4th through the 12th. And the Ohio Occurrence is September 1st through the 3rd in and around Cincinnati. You all are welcome to attend. No experience required, but registration is required, especially if you'd like to have accommodations in the activist house. So reach out through our Facebook page or to one of the mentors here or through our website. If you would like to share your Instagram handle in the chat, feel free, or your website, feel free to do that. Please consider donating to AAM or becoming a patron by finding AAM on Patreon. Your donations allow AAM to continue to provide free educational resources for activists, which ultimately saves more animals. So again, thank you, Alaina, for your time and wisdom today. Thanks, Trey, for managing the back end. Thank you all for being here and the tireless work you're doing for the animals. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or mentee, want to get involved, please reach out to us. If you'd like to be added to our email newsletter list, you can drop your email in the chat. And until next time, everyone, stay strong, stay hopeful, and live vegan, everyone.
Namaste, vegan.
Namaste, vegan.